It is 4 o'clock, and the Kerrville City Council is now in workshop, and we received public comments at this time. Do we have anyone to speak that you know of, Ms. McLennan?
No, sir.
Okay. Let's move then to information and discussion, creation of neighborhood empowerment zone. And
Yes, sir, Mayor. So we have this item slated for your workshop agenda today, simply to provide education to you. So there's no action item today or later in your business meeting today. And really all we'll be looking for is guidance from you all on whether you'd like us to proceed with a future action item or the drafting or redrafting of any type of programmatic ordinance in that regard. We do have Ms. Megan Folkert today, and that's going to provide you some summary information in regards to this program, which is provided for via state law. Essentially, as you may recall, this was an item that came out of Kerrville 2050. It was specifically drafted at this point or conceptualized at this point in regards to the DOYLE area. And it was really about neighborhood stabilization and the desire to be able to provide tools in the tool belt for the city to do a number of things. Both encourage economic development of businesses that may be located there or want to locate in that area, which was a desire that was expressed both within Kerrville 2050 and within the DOYLE area plan. And then also to provide for the rehabilitation of homes within that area and to provide economic stabilization for homeowners that want to continue to live and have their homesteads within that area. So with that, I'd like to ask Megan Folkert to come to the podium and present to the City Council.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We do have a presentation. Not sure. Is that something Martin was doing? Here it is. Perfect. So before I begin, I just wanted to point out you do have 2 stapled copies of just the most recent rough drafts we've worked on for just accompanying documents for this. Exhibit B is going to be the policy and basic incentives for this neighborhood empowerment zone. And the other one is the Chapter 380 Economic Development Program that is associated with this as well. So, like Mr. Hoppy mentioned, this is about the creation of the neighborhood empowerment zone for the DOYLE community area. So why a neighborhood empowerment zone? So the first part is to go back through the Kerrville Comprehensive Plan for 2050. So we have several guiding principles that have led us to identify this need. The first one is the guiding principle C2. So seek to attract a range of housing options to provide choices for people with a variety of ages, incomes, lifestyles, etc. So the specific action item for that is to identify vacant lots and develop incentives or abatements for infill development where adequate utilities exist. Another guiding principle is to celebrate and honor the character of each neighborhood and its culture, revitalize neighborhoods and create gathering places within them while avoiding the displacement of citizens and their cultures. So that specific action item is when promoting revitalization or redevelopment, Kerrville should try to minimize the displacement of people already in neighborhoods so that the sense of community and culture is not lost. Another few guiding principles that we identified were important is to promote walkability and complete streets, focusing on community health and a review of new development proposals, and supporting pleasing, well-kept neighborhoods that maintain their value and help sustain economic development. That specific action item provide tax breaks or other incentives to individuals or developers for including elements that promote mobility and public health goals, such as walkability, complete streets, etc. And just quickly to wrap that up, the next guiding principle is to maintain quality and value of existing neighborhoods. So research potential funding mechanisms for existing rehabilitation and renovation of homes. The next one is to develop policies, processes, and programs, including the economic incentives, to work on attracting and retaining and expanding businesses. So is to re-examine the EIC and city incentive matrix criteria, to develop possible assistance with a variety of tools, and of those is tax abatements. So to go over briefly the history of the DOYLE area plan, Whenever that was first started, they found project goals, which are to preserve existing neighborhood character, encourage investment to stabilize the neighborhood, prevent deterioration and loss of property value, identify the stakeholder priorities, provide for infill development, redevelopment that is consistent with the existing community character, avoid placing unnecessary burdens on owners wishing to make improvement to their properties. And the specific piece that tied Kerrville 2050 is for the community and neighborhood character, and that was to celebrate and honor the character of each neighborhood and its culture, to revitalize the neighborhoods and create gathering places within them while avoiding the displacement of citizens and their cultures. Okay, so this is just an aerial map of the DOYLE area. At the bottom is the legend if you're interested in what each of those pieces are. This one is of the home ownership area, the same DOYLE area aerial view. And that legend there just shows the different properties, some that are already tax exempt and the other ones that are commercial or industrial, or the other ones that have the homestead exemption currently.
Where's the red? Is that just residential?
So the red is single-family residential, and perhaps more importantly, the ones that have the black outline around those are the ones that have a homestead exemption. So those are folks that have applied for their homestead exemption and have created a homestead within this area.
Now, I don't mean to jump ahead, but is this the zone we're looking at right now?
Correct. Yeah. As
These are the
currently,
boundaries for the zone?
that's right.
Okay.
So this district, the boundary was adopted through the DOYLE area plan, and so as it's been conceptualized right now, it would have the same boundary. But that's certainly amendable if the council wanted to. We just, for clarity purposes, we had conceptualized it that way for now.
What, the tax exempt at the top, just off of Holsworth, there's two areas, and that's not the Croc Center.
No,
Soccer
just to
fields,
the
maybe?
east. No, just to the east of the Croc Center, there is a surface water tank that's actually located right in that area that is owned by the city.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's kind of an odd shape. You'll see it has a very narrow sliver that comes down there.
Okay.
We also approved a housing development in that area.
It's right outside there.
Yeah, it's just outside of it. It's just to the
Right.
northwest.
That's at the purple box.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
So
all right.
generally, that kind of northern boundary there, it sort of makes a tip. That's Pascal Road.
Okay.
And the little one, EA, under that larger one, there's the gray, and then there's
What is
a
red?
kind of a longer pink. And then there's one on the other side also.
So those are,
Industrial.
I believe, multifamily properties.
Well, the one on the right probably is. I'm sure that one is.
Mhm.
But I don't know about
Smaller,
the one on the
thinner
left.
rectangle?
Is that
Yeah.
that
So
in the cemetery, is it?
Near Carver? Is that what you're looking at?
Oh, I bet it is a cemetery.
Right.
yeah. So
Did we say what gray was?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
is gray?
Is that unimproved property?
most of those are vacant properties. Correct.
Okay.
So that is zoned right there along Pascal, just to the north of the arrow there. That is a property that is zoned multifamily.
The pink or the gray?
The pink is
The cemetery.
existing multifamily. No, the
Oh.
cemetery is actually just to the north of that, outside of the boundary.
Okay. Okay, so say that again, please. The gray is,
The gray is vacant properties for the
Vacant.
most part, although I will say just
Parks in
right
there.
there, that area is actually Carver Park. So,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
that actually should be labeled as tax.
So the
exempt.
gray's where the infill goes, basically.
It could. It could. Now,
Potentially.
it may also be owned by an adjacent homestead
Right.
property and just not platted as
Mhm.
one piece of property.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, to be clear, we're not looking at replacing Carver Park.
No, absolutely not.
Oh, yeah, no, I
Absolutely
mean,
not, no.
yeah, good.
No,
good
this actually should be,
clarification there.
for whatever reason, it's labeled as vacant, but it really should be labeled as tax exempt. So you can see the large area there off McFarland, that's purple, right in that area, that's the city yard property.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the general purpose and objectives of the Neighborhood Empowerment Zone. So the Chapter 378 of the Texas Local Government Codes allows a municipality to create a neighborhood empowerment zone when a municipality determines that the creation of the zone would promote the creation of affordable housing, including manufactured housing inside the zone, an increase in the economic development in the zone, an increase in the quality of social services, education, or safety provided to residents in the zone, or for the rehabilitation of affordable housing in the zone.
But we're not promoting manufactured housing.
That's correct. This would be, it does include it within the chapter of the statute, but per our zoning code, it's really looking at simply renovation of and infill of single-family homes.
Okay.
And that was the question I was gonna ask.
Correct. Yeah, and you're able to craft, this is kind of the overall pieces of that chapter
Doesn't fit
378,
one of those
but you're
things.
absolutely able to still, within your locality, have additional elements that are part of the programmatic, and part of that is that any improvement has to meet the existing
of
zoning
those.
code and the codes of the
No.
city.
No.
And for each neighborhood empowerment zone, the city council may approve additional terms and incentives as permitted by the Chapter 378 of the Texas Local Government Code or by city council resolution. So that can include grants and actions taken in accordance with the city's 380 program, which is stapled in front of you. Okay. So the potential NEZ elements that are outlined in this policy are the municipal property tax abatements. That includes residential properties, new construction or rehabilitation of multifamily development projects or commercial projects. The second piece is fee waivers, grants, and services. So that breaks down to specifically fee waivers, primary residence grants for tax stabilization, and services.
Can you hang on just a second? I just need to.
And we'll go into more detail on these few slides. This is just to introduce.
So it's really kind of two categories. One is related more towards tax abatement, and one is kind of generalized and gives us a whole host of other tools like tap fees or other things.
Gotcha. Okay.
And also, it's geared to help prevent gentrification. I mean, we can't prevent it completely, but this helps us to do that.
That's correct. It's a tool in your tool belt to help stabilization of homesteaders that want to continue to live in their home and may be seeing rising property values.
Okay.
So more specifically on the municipal property tax abatements, this will include residential properties located in the NEZ. That includes full 100% abatement of incremental increases for 10 years. It includes new construction or rehabilitation of multifamily development projects located in the NEZ. That's full 100% abatement for 5 years. Then the commercial projects located in the NEZ includes full 100% abatement of incremental increases for 5 years.
Now, Megan, is this is our proposal or this is a standard?
Yeah, this is what we've put together
This is
within
what
this
we've
proposal.
put together
That's
as a
correct.
proposal. Okay.
And all of these goes into a lot more detail in that packet,
Mhm.
the policy.
Okay, so we'll find out on what page?
New
So-
construction or rehabilitation, full
Yeah.
abatement, that means they're not gonna be paying for the increased value, is that what that means?
That's correct, the incremental value.
So it's on page 3 and 4. It goes specifically into all three of these.
Okay, thanks.
So just right after the definition section.
Okay,
Now, the first bullet point just says residential properties that are located, they get 100% abatement. Does that mean whether they do any new construction or rehabilitation, no matter what, as long as they're within that zone, they get those abatements?
It's like a tax ceiling, right? Like you would,
Yeah,
Okay.
so each one, the way this is crafted is each property owner, homesteader that would be interested in going forward, that would do an individualized agreement. So they'd have their own basically NEZ agreement with the city, Chapter 380 agreement that would outline all the specifics of that, and they'd have to maintain that homestead exemption throughout that time period.
But is that, I mean, you would look at that as a tax ceiling, would it be similar to an over 65 exemption in that way? Is it
Similar.
Similar?
That's correct. Yeah, except it would be there's a
10
it's a
years.
refunding mechanism, right? So the
Okay.
taxes are those
Yeah,
property taxes are still
Okay.
collected and then refunded back to
refunded.
them.
Okay,
That's
right.
correct.
gotcha.
Now, this question may be premature. Are there requirements for them to keep that house up to, as far as condition and repairs, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So right now, it absolutely can be a part of the criteria that's within that to meet minimum property code standards and to keep it to basically whatever standard that the community desires to and that you all desire to in those agreements. Because you ultimately each one of those individual agreements will come back to the council, so you will have that authority. The other element that you asked about, they've got, it also has to be at least a 20% improvement for if it's a property owner that's doing a rehabilitation.
20%
What do you mean
improvement.
by that?
I don't,
So if it's a rehab versus just a, if it's someone that's coming in to actually improve a property versus just the stabilization aspect, yeah, it will, it'll actually be, folks are able to improve their properties, but it does have to have a minimum threshold. So, for instance, if someone had a $100,000 property, they couldn't necessarily just come in and do a $1,000 improvement and be eligible for abatement on that new value.
oh,
So it'd have to have a certain level of reinvestment
Okay.
that's occurred.
okay,
Does that make sense?
yes.
And the overall reason for this is to try and, number one, stop gentrification. Number two, to upgrade or enhance the area. And the reason I'm asking is because I'm probably going to get questions like, well, how come what's done over here can't be done anywhere? And so how do I counter that with the reasons for this?
Yeah. So, I think there were specific elements within the comprehensive plan that, in regards to the displacement elements, right, that were concerns really for all neighborhoods. But I think, certainly as identified in the DOYLE area plan, there were areas that were specifically identified. That area was specifically identified as particularly prone to that displacement issue, right?
Okay.
And so this was, and perhaps this tool is expanded, in the future. Maybe this is a pilot program that looks
Yeah.
at additional elements in the future.
Right, and I would also say that that's part of the area development plan. So when you talk about tools in the tool belt, it was identified as a concern of that community, right? So
Okay.
you have a plan that identifies this as what can, like, it's just the same thing as for me, like with workforce housing. We get this workforce housing study done, right? And it gives us 9 strategies or so. And one of those is leverage city-owned property for housing development. So that's what we did when we did. So
Yes, okay.
to me, that is the framework that I start with. Is we have a plan. The plan said this is a need. It identified a concern, and this is the mechanism that might help
Okay.
us with that concern for that particular area. Then, as EA said,
on,
if we
yeah.
move to another area development zone, we may have something like this, or it may look totally
Okay.
different when we get into that area and see what those needs and concerns are.
Okay, yeah, that
That's
helps a
for
lot.
me. That's
Yeah.
for me personally. That's how I look
It's
at it.
not one and only, it's just the first of
Yes.
what, of
Okay.
more to come.
Okay.
I may be jumping ahead, but something that Ms. Clarkson just said. When we get ready to look at another neighborhood to do this, how is the decision made on which neighborhood?
Yeah, ultimately, council makes that decision, right? So I think that when you all are ready to, that can be a topic of discussion, and you all can direct us on how you want to proceed. And there's opportunities for that to be multiple ones potentially, if resources allow for that, and you all budget for that going forward. And there's also opportunities to look at commercial areas within specific strategic catalyst zones that you may be interested in us looking at.
And I think you've kind of given us some different areas to just think about. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, but we certainly look to council to provide us guidance on where you want to proceed with that.
Ms. Folkers?
Alrighty. Okay, the next part is going to go over the fee waivers, grants, and services. So to start, the fee waivers, For eligible NEZ applicants, development-related fee waivers may include the following on a case-by-case basis as authorized by the city manager. So currently, that includes building permit fees to include plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, plan review fees, right-of-way fees, tap fees, floodplain, water permit, sprinkler system permit, plat application fees, demolition, zoning application fees, and NEZ incentive application fees.
So two things I noticed on that one, just to bring up, case by case basis, just that consideration and how that works so that it's clear enough that there's not any
Selective enforcement.
selective, yes.
Consistency.
And I do also agree with that being authorized outside of city council.
Mhm.
So just
Yeah.
put that out there.
Yeah.
The next two pieces call for primary resident grants for tax stabilization. So for eligible NEZ applicants, City Council may award Chapter 380 grants to stabilize local taxes paid on a primary residence on a case-by-case basis. And for services, for NEZ applicants, the following in-kind services, but not limited to, may be granted on a case-by-case basis. That includes voluntary demolitions, utility taps, minor home improvements, and tree trimming. To round us out, the ineligible projects identified for the project to be considered for NEZ incentives pursuant to this policy, the project must comply with the zoning code. So the following projects or businesses shall not be eligible for any incentives under the policy. So that includes sexually oriented businesses, mobile structures, tattoo parlors, slot machine businesses, smoke or vape shops, mobile and industrial home sales, check cashing stores and payday lending, chemical-oriented business, or non-conforming uses.
Can you explain what a non-conforming use is?
So, that may be a property that currently is not in conjunction with the zoning code, but, has obviously continued to be able to operate within that area because it's an existing business or an existing operation of some sort. And so it may not be conforming with the zoning code, but it wouldn't necessarily be eligible for this program if it, for instance, was making a rehabilitation of that because it's not, the zoning it ultimately is the community's vision for the appropriate uses that are within that zone. So certainly this code isn't shutting them down, the zoning code doesn't shut them down, but it's also not necessarily promoting the continued existence of it over a long period of time, right? It's just letting the market kind of move that into another use at some point. So, but this
So it's
doesn't-
kind of, I mean,
Grandfathered.
I don't want to use the term grandfathered, but it's able to continue to function,
That's right.
but then,
It's not being incentivized to be
Yes.
continuing to function though.
okay.
So did you have any additional questions?
I guess the main thing is going back to the case-by-case basis for the city manager, right, is who we look at authorizing, putting together some type of policy in place to be consistent across the board for everybody. Is there a way that we could possibly even say, if you're within, if you want this much in dollar amounts, permit fees waived, you can do that without having to go through this process? Could that also expedite it as well? Look at in that.
Yeah, certainly. I think any guidance you guys want to provide, the council wants to provide, and it's specifically related to that fee element and that whole section. I think what we've outlined on the other pieces, those are going to have one-off agreements that are going to be coming specifically to you all.
Right.
I think what we really anticipated in regards to Section 4, the fee waivers, grants, and services. Particularly the fee waiver element, those may be very simple kind of one-off pieces that, somebody's reinvesting in their business and they simply need an upgraded tap fee, right? So we would normally anticipate, that would be something that would need to come through the full council process. But ultimately, that's y'all's call. If y'all want that to be the case, we can make that happen. So, but we can set it at a threshold as well, a certain monetary level that you want it to be kicked back up to council. We can do that.
Okay.
So
What's
this
the
is totally
time-
customizable.
I'm sorry, timeframe that we're looking at implementing this?
You know, it's really up to council. You know, we wanted to bring this workshop item to you today. We realize this is a lot to digest, and so you know, we've gone through a pretty significant level of staff work in looking at other programs across the state. Some are in very big cities and they're very complex. Some are, you know, in smaller communities and still very complex. You know, we tried to take you know, a very common sense approach and really what we felt might be applicable for Kerrville. You know, I know it's still got some degree of complexity to it, but we really did try to simplify it down to some basic elements, very much in alignment with what it seemed like the DOYLE area plan and the comprehensive plan were directing us to. And so we tried to craft it in that nature, but it's totally at y'all's pace. If y'all wanted to enact something and bring it forward at your next meeting, we can do that. If y'all want another workshop, we can come back at that time. And y'all can digest this information and just give us some feedback offline, and we can begin to move forward in that way. And anytime y'all are ready, we'll bring it back on your agenda.
And I assume that it would stand to reason that the overall impact to the revenue isn't going to be huge, right?
I don't think we're anticipating that, right? I think that you know, overall, you know, for one thing, it's you know, it's about stabilization of an existing base, right? So it's only the increment on top of that. So you know, I don't think so, and I think it's a combination because this also provides tools of you know, potentially incentivizing businesses and other things to locate in those areas, and the potential for vacant lots to have new construction that occurs. So you know, I think we're anticipating, at least at this point, that you know, it really just would be kind of a wash.
I would just like to say that I've followed this pretty closely, in part because of my history with the DOYLE area. But I have been very impressed at how the city has really listened to the citizens, taken ideas from the citizens, been very careful about what is done and what is proposed. And I'm sensing excitement in this area for some very good things that are coming out of this. And so I think it's a model. I would like to also say, you just mentioned there's a good bit of staff work that's gone into what you presented today. I said this at our council retreat last week, but as mayor, I really appreciate your bringing things to us with solid staff work, laid out, options are there, and so that's a big help. But I just have one other question, Ms. Folkers. How many hats do you wear at the city?
I wear a lot of hats.
I think
Whichever
so.
one they give me when I walk in the morning.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other word?
Is it possible, and I know most of what you've got here is in Exhibit B, is there a map in Exhibit B?
There is not a map in Exhibit B, but what we could do, we can email you guys this presentation, and in fact, we can send
If you
you
would, that'd be
the
great.
electronic copies of these two maps, so you can kind of blow them up
Yes.
to their PDF
Thank
a little
you.
bit higher resolution. We'd be happy to forward those to you.
Okay. Very
Thank
good.
I have two more questions.
Yeah.
Do we know, because I'm not really sure of any other city similar to us that does this? That way we can kind of, are we looking at like their program too? Kind of?
Yeah, so there are a few others that we've looked at. So City of Arlington
Okay.
has a neighborhood empowerment zone. There were several other communities in DFW that we pulled from. Locally within the Hill Country area, there aren't, you know, Fredericksburg and Bernie don't have any. I don't think that San Antonio does, but there were several DFW communities that we did some research on that provided some examples for us.
Okay, sounds good. And are these two documents, so these are drafts, are these gonna have to come back for us to approve?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are really just for comments from you all and how you want us to proceed, and if there's, you know, additional elements or modifications, because these are mostly programmatic, right? And so this can be customized in any way that the council feels is appropriate for our community. So absolutely, these aren't ready for approval tonight by any means, and so we're looking for comments both on timeline
That's what I was
as
gonna ask.
well as
Like
any
time.
programmatic changes that you'd like to see.
In regard to Mr. Garcia's first question, I assume since the state provides this as an option, that they see a benefit to it.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think that that we're fortunate in that they have provided this as a mechanism, again, tool in the tool belt for local communities to be able to do the business that local citizens, desire to be done.
Okay, all right, good. Any other questions?
No, I think we need a little time to digest it. Not a lot,
Absolutely.
but a little.
Absolutely.
And,
We'll move at y'all's pace. Just let us know.
All right, is there a need for us to approve this by when?
No, not there. There's no timeline on it. It's simply certainly you're seeing market dynamics out there occurring across the community and in this neighborhood. So that's really we'll move at y'all's pace. If y'all want us to move forward with something this summer, we can do that. We're ready to go when y'all are.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
yeah, in terms of the urgency,
Mhm.
we know that there is at least one investment company out of Arizona that is looking to buy properties in this area. So the urgency would be for us to move so that we've got better flexibility and options for this community.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Simply market dynamics, market driven.
yeah.
So on the implementation piece, if we approve by X date, then the red line year becomes when, based on when we approve it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
When you all desire for us to move forward with an actual policy document, we'd be bringing it forward with it becomes part of our policy piece. So you'd actually be making an amendment to your Chapter 380 program to allow for some housing elements that aren't necessarily in there right now. It kind of broadens that out just a little bit. And then by resolution, I believe you'd also be adopting the policy piece. And so then we'd be able to, probably have some educational materials. We'd probably set up some neighborhood meetings within the DOYLE area so we could explain this because there are some complexities to the tools. And so we would look to be having some educational elements within the neighborhood. And then we'd be entering into one-off agreements with property owners. And so you talked about timeline earlier. One of those things would be, some homeowners may have a desire to put that in place this tax year, right before the end of this calendar year. So that certainly is a driver.
Would it make sense, or has there been discussions about this with the neighborhood prior to something coming before council for approval? I mean, have we had any discussions in that neighborhood about this program, and if so, what have they said?
So I think not necessarily about every element of the program, but I think there has continued to be interest expressed by the neighborhood in neighborhood meetings that we've had with them in regards to rising property values within that area, developer interest that's in that area, potentially buying up single family homes.
How did they feel about that?
And then also certainly the that point that came out of the DOYLE area plan was generated by the neighborhood from the get-go.
Okay.
So they didn't necessarily know what tools were available to help combat that, but certainly the desire was expressed. Yeah, the concern was expressed.
I would say, Ms. Hughes' point, if we can do an information session and say this is what we're looking at, here are the advantages and that kind of thing, before we come to council and vote on it, I think it would be good.
Sure.
Yeah, because there's been I've seen an increase in the level of trust between that neighborhood and the city, and so I would be very, very agreeable to doing some form of just I don't want to call it a town hall, but just like gather under the pavilion like we did with that other, and tell them what we'd like to see and get their feedback before anything goes before council.
The other thing maybe would be to do that kind of meeting inside the new building with the air conditioning and the room all finished that we'd meet in. That kind of thing would be a nice kickoff for that.
Absolutely.
But that's scheduled to be when?
Well, August, September. It may be a little later than we'd really like.
I think so, because I think we need to move ahead. We know what we're doing. We need to move ahead, and it can be done. I've held meetings at Barnett Chapel. We do Mount Olive, whatever.
But I'm just gonna say this, and the education piece. I'm in complete agreement with in the conversations. I guess my point would be that it would make, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see anything being proposed here that wouldn't be advantageous to the neighborhood. So I would feel more confident going in saying, this is our plan and this is how it's going to benefit you. And I say that because I don't see any drawback to it. Whereas if we're like, what do you want? And we get all of these answers and then we have to come back and we redraft or renegotiate, or someone doesn't feel like they were heard. If there were something that had potential downfalls that we needed to like really get in there and dig into, like I think this is all upside.
Yeah,
Well,
do they know it's all upside?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the,
Yeah.
But but we take it to them after the plan is in place, because I don't want to sell somebody something and then council come back and like, oh no, never mind, I don't like this, I don't like the way this is drawn up. I don't want to dangle something out there without having said this is what we're giving you. I mean, if somebody were to say, guess what, I don't want you to have to pay increased taxes, and so we passed this so that you can have your property taxes not, continue to go up as an education piece. I just don't see I don't see the downside of taking it to them as it's drafted or as it's approved.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for promoting it, certainly, but it's a issue of being inclusive and keeping them in the loop and letting them know, hey, we've got great stuff going on. This is how it's going to benefit you. At least give them the opportunity to ask questions.
Yes. I think we need to take it to them before we we passed it. Not so much to ask questions,
Right.
but they need to be educated and feel like we're not pulling the wool over their eyes.
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia?
Thank you. I think it would be good for us to do some type of informational session, work session, whatever we want to kind of do over there in the DOYLE community. I don't want it to seem like we're trying to tell them what's good for them, and I know a lot of this, we can give a perspective of it's beneficial to them. But at the same time, if they have questions or concerns, it's going to be their neighborhood that's going to be affected. And so I feel like they have, the
Okay,
right
and I'm fine with that, but I just want to ask all of you, do you think there's any downside to what we're doing?
I
Is there
don't.
any potential
no.
No.
pitfall in what
Okay.
we're doing?
No,
Let me give you
That's
an
all I'm
example.
saying. I don't want to be looked at as someone that's not trying to be inclusive.
Oh,
I'm
no,
all
no.
for education. I'm just saying there's no downside to this. This is all upside, and I'd rather say this isn't something we're thinking about, but this is something we've done, and it's an opt-in program. Like, it's not like we've bound you to this program. It's like, hey, we're offering this to you because this is what we believe in. And if you don't like it, then hey, you don't have to opt into this program.
But part of our trust has been going to them, working with them, explaining things.
I get that, Judy. But what if we come to council and we don't approve it? We're like, here, we're going to do all this stuff, and then like, in the meantime, we're like, no, I don't like this or this.
Well, I think in the meantime, we've got the opportunity to go through it, do some revisions or whatever else. But I'm telling you, in that neighborhood, for reasons that they have been ignored and they've been manipulated and they've been forgotten, there is an element of trust that is big. I'll give you an example. When Fred Gamble and I came to them at a meeting at Barnett Chapel about buying with Callow money the DOYLE School and make it into a community center, which we said, boy, this is all up, this is upside, this is good. The community had said they wanted this kind of thing. But we got in there and the word was out that Fred and I were actually working as agents for somebody else, and we were going to get that DOYLE School and sell it. And that had to do with the lack of trust. And so I think we are far better off to do information session, go over that kind of thing, and then come back to council. And we may come back to council, certainly may, with some revisions. But they know it, and they've had an opportunity to hear it.
Well, and in response to Councilmember Clarkson, there may be nothing that's a downside about this project, but I also don't think there's a downside of going to them. You
Yeah,
know, I don't see the downside.
I
of
see
doing
the
that,
downside
too.
being if we promise something that we don't deliver on.
yeah, that, okay,
So I think, yeah, that's a good point. So I think that's why we need to go to them and say, you know, this is not something we're gonna say yes, this is solidified. Because I think if we were to go them with a solid plan and say this is it, and then there are some things they have a little bit uncomfortable with, that would be then something for us to be like, well, this is what we set in stone. Now they don't like it. So
Yeah.
we include them in that. I think would be beneficial. So, you know, council, I think if we want to have another work session before then, you know, for us to go over one more thing or anything else that we have, and the next session can be an informational session or working with them at the DOYLE community. You know, probably have 2 more, 3 more maybe.
Yeah.
On this.
If we looked at this again in 2 weeks, is that enough time for us to work through it?
Are you saying like the next before next council meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, if I could make a suggestion, one thing that might, if the council's amenable to it, it might give you time for digestion. Maybe we call a work session at one of those locations, and then it gives you guys an opportunity to actually have we can have an open house beforehand and invite the community and answer questions, and then also gives you guys an opportunity to have a public meeting that you all can provide input and you know, potentially express your you know, desires to questions you may have or comments you may have, and be able to get feedback kind of both ways, but then they're able to hear you guys officially.
As long as the neighbors have input, yeah.
Yeah, and if there's a way for us to have a meeting for a more conversational structure of it rather than the 4 minutes and then they have to sit down in case there are a couple of things, more of an informal type of thing. I think that, you know, we don't want to also intimidate them. This is going to be a formal meeting.
Well, like we did before.
Right. Yeah, I think that'd be something good to
And
do.
we can look at the way that we format that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay,
You have, are you clear?
Yeah, we'll look at some dates and locations here that might be available in the next 4-ish weeks.
Okay.
just one more thing, then we'll move on to the point. When I was working with the county judge, Tinley, on the economic development strategy plan for the city and county, the judge asked me to do a meeting over at the DOYLE Center of folks in the neighborhood who, you know, receive wages and salaries, to talk about low-income folks and where they were in regard to the economic development plan. We had 19 people around the tables, and it was revealing and very interesting. So I think there's real value to it. All right, we're going to look at executive session, but before we do, this is not actually on the agenda, but Mrs. McElhannon is providing for us these scratch pads that are actually dated 2019.
Mine was 2020.
Mine's 2020.
Oh, well, you're privileged.
I got a 2019.
So
You got what? You got 20?
2019.
I'll trade you. You have my
I'm sorry, due to COVID that just occurred in the
Yeah.
pandemic, we
we
cut a few things out of our
I
budget.
know we cut some out of the budget, but I mean, 2019.
So we're not to keep this then, this is just what we're using.
You can keep them if you want.
Yeah.
We do
I
have
kept about
others.
5 of them before I realized I was supposed to leave them here.
just don't look at the dates.
They're floating around my
Right.
home somewhere.
It's funny.
Okay. Let me ask you, do we have a motion to go into executive session for board appointments and for the Kerrville Zoning Board of Adjustments and Mr. Paxton to consider this matter?
Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session for board appointments, Economic Development Corporation 551.074, and for the City of Kerrville versus and Drew Paxton defendants, plaintiff versus the City of Kerrville, Zoning Board of Adjustments and Drew Paxton defendants, number 551.071.
A second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. I need to clarify, Mr. Paxton is not a defendant, but anyway, Okay, all in favor?
That's true,
All
so,
in favor of that motion?
sorry,
please
Drew.
Raise the right hand. Right, okay, there we go. Okay, we will adjourn to upstairs.